Tēnā koutou, nau mai haere mai, and welcome to Mahi Matters, New Zealand's employment market update. Now, apologies, I've been out of action for the last couple of weeks with a fairly spectacular finger injury from hockey, right on time for Halloween. And this week, we're doing things a little bit differently, and we'll be taking a look back at some of the key hiring trends that have shaped our employment landscape over the past few months, revisiting a few standout conversations we've had with leading experts across the country. On today's show, what's guiding the direction of public sector priorities in New Zealand? Is your career prepared for the future impact of AI on the world of work? How is procrastination actually holding your career hostage? We've got plenty of insights to help you stay informed to what's really happening in your market as we head towards the end of the year. Let's dive straight into the show. So the past year has been one of real change for New Zealand's public sector. We've seen shifting priorities, tighter budgets, and increasing pressure on organisations to do more with less. At the same time, public expectations have continued to grow, and it's been a balancing act between meeting immediate demands and keeping an eye on longer-term goals. Heading into 2026, what are the biggest challenges facing public sector leaders, and why is talent attraction and retention becoming such a critical hurdle? To discuss this further, we're joined today by Peter Cristani, Wellington Branch Manager at 𝗏𝗏 Recruitment. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Shannon. Thanks for having me on.
No problems. So starting off, how would you describe the public sector down in Wellington currently and over the last year? We know it's been a really challenging time.
Yeah. Well, this year's so far has been a tale of two halves, really. The first half was the saying at the end of last year was survive to 25, and we got into 25, and then it was get to the budget, so it got and then it would go quiet. April was very quiet because of the holidays and Easter, and then we got to the budget, and that was a bit of a non-event in terms of impact on the employment market. So then it was drifting along, and we were increasing our workloads and contractor numbers. Then from we got into the new financial year, so 1 July, and we've seen quite a marked increase in activity since then. So this part is leading into Christmas. We've had a lot more contract roles, we've had a lot more permanent roles, and I think that's because we're getting close to heading into an election year, and we're heading into that cycle of the government wants to get things done, to be able to tick some boxes. And I think the government agencies have been challenged with decreasing numbers. They haven't had the staffing levels that they've wanted. And then with some new priorities coming in, they haven't had the staff, so we're starting to get where roles have been on hold for a long time. They're going, okay, well, we can now recruit. And for specific pieces of work, they've been looking at bringing on contractors. So very much a tale of two halves in the employment market at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. It sure has been a long time coming, but it does seem to be, touch wood, it does seem to be turning a corner, and definitely a lot more activity recently, which I'm sure is welcome relief to everyone in Wellington particularly. You mentioned some of the challenges there to leaders with this change, and specifically when it comes to attracting and retaining talent. What do you think for some of the agencies in particular who are starting to perhaps rebuild their teams or have more activity within their teams and trying to get the needed talent on board?
Well, yeah, I suppose what we've seen is that salary expectations from candidates are increasing because of cost of living, and clients are, like on the contracting front, the rates have come down. So we've had high supply of contractors, low demand, and then pressure on the rates from government agencies to pay less from what they would have done perhaps 18 months or 2 years ago. In the permanent market, you've got the same sort of thing where people are going, well, I was on 90K and I really need 100K compared to a year ago to keep my head above water. So candidate expectations is rising. Client expectations are probably down a little bit or steady. So we've got that situation sometimes, and at the moment we've got a few roles where the client wants someone with this level of experience, but the salary is kind of down here. And what gives? Do you give money or do you give in terms of experience? So meeting those expectations is going to be quite challenging. In some spaces, there's still a real shortage, like senior policy roles permanent. That's difficult to get good experienced people at the right kind of salary level that the clients are looking for. So you kind of got the creeping candidate market up with expectations, clients steady or down, and sometimes hard to really match those two expectations on both parties.
Yeah, and I guess that you have definitely been a hard run, particularly in the public sector over the last couple of years at least. And, once bitten, twice shy. I'm sure as the rest of the country is affected as well, I'm sure Wellington's no exception, with people going, right, I've had enough, and yeah, maybe the grass is greener across the ditch. It's not, by the way, stay here, but I'm sure you have lost a lot of talent, just had enough and taking themselves elsewhere. Let's try and flip this around to a bit more positive, because it is a really positive thing that we're seeing a lot more work within that space. So what opportunities lie ahead for the public sector next year?
Well, we're heading into election year, so the government will be wanting, I'll put this in positive terms, the government will be wanting good stories to tell to get re-elected. They'll have expectations for the Parliament, and the Cabinet will have expectations on the government agencies to really deliver. So I think there's going to be more urgent work from Parliament into government sector, and the challenge would have been the thinning out up until sort of earlier this year of the government sector, so the downsizing. So have they got the talent to actually deliver what they need to do? So I think there's going to be opportunities there. There is some of the work that we've got is intergenerational change stuff, and it's really exciting and interesting to go, okay, well, rather than status quo, the Parliament, the National Act-led government are wanting to make some significant changes. Whether you agree with their philosophies or not, take that aside, but they're really trying to make some differences in some sectors. And so we're seeing some intergenerational change that hasn't happened for 20 years. And so you've got some very interesting pieces of work that's going to take quite a bit of time to start, develop, and then put into place. So I think from that expectation, big pieces of work, interesting pieces of work, election time, so they'll be wanting to be delivery as well, so time frames will be compressed, so they'll have to deliver quickly. I think the challenge is going to be for the government agencies to meet the government expectations for delivery, but that is an opportunity as well. So there'll be opportunities for shorter term contract work, I would imagine, for some of these pieces of work, where I was talking to one GM a couple of weeks ago and he said, oh, we're recruiting. I don't think I've done this for a wee while. What do we have to do again? Kind of situation. It was, and we're all going, well, actually, we've got to relearn this. So, but I do get the sense there's more happening and more change happening. There's a bit more energy. There's more outcome focused rather than the negative. We've got to cut. So we're into the more positive. We've got to grow and show and develop and make things happen.
Yeah, fantastic. And what priorities do you think will continue to have an impact for both employers and job seekers in the public sector in the year to come?
Yeah, interesting. I think a lot of things the same in private sector. So there'll be the economic drivers, how the economy's going. There will be the election. There will be cost of living drivers as well. There'll be, we've got how will AI affect, so some government agencies are really embracing and trying to do more with automation and AI. How do they manage that? I think it's now such a tidal wave of change that's going to happen, and how do they manage it? What do they do? What does it mean for their organisations? What does it mean for their employees? Will the roles change? I think in terms of for candidates, in terms of recruitment, when they present themselves, AI, they must take into account AI for their CVs. Is when they send a CV, it'll go probably through a parsing agent, AI agent, which will give them an idea give the hiring manager an idea of are they recommended, not recommended, that sort of thing. So how you do your CV will impact to be able to lift your CV to be more attractive or to be seen first as the first step. And then on the client side, look, AI is going to be interesting. Are you seeing what's actually real, or is it generated and fabricated? And we've had the odd case of that where someone's thought that their experience was bigger than what it actually was, and sort of there's a lot of hyperbole in their CV. So lots of interesting things. I don't think we really know what's going to happen, but given the economic clouds, who knows with that? But the major impact in government will be the election year, by far.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lots of exciting changes, and again, it's just great to have this activity after a pretty stagnant time within that space. Okay, so jumping right into it, a survey earlier this year revealed that 86% of Kiwis are already using AI at work in their day-to-day activities. With AI now woven into everything from communication and data analysis to decision-making and automation, it's no longer just a tool for tech teams, it's reshaping entire industries. As the pace of change accelerates, professionals are faced with the critical question: evolve or risk falling behind? Knowing how to stay relevant has never been more important. So is your career prepared for the future impact of AI? To discuss this further, we're joined today by Janet Tuck, Career Planning Specialist at Career Clinic. Welcome, Janet.
Hi, Shannon. Thanks.
Well, it's great to have you here. Perhaps if you can start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the Career Clinic.
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit further than just yesterday. I started out in teaching and have done quite a lot of community development over the years, so quite engaged with a lot that was going on in the community, and did some actually mentoring. Started off doing a lot of mentoring with my kids' friends when they got to sort of teenage years, funnily enough. One thing I worked out, though, many years ago, my interest really lies in helping people make best decisions that they can for themselves. And that has become now more involved with work, teams and organisations as well. So I'm very strategic in terms of how I work. So I like to help people think strategically about themselves. My company, Career Clinic, offers, as you said, career management and development services and workplace coaching and support. That includes everything from job search strategy, perhaps interview coaching, outplacement support. We do a lot of leadership coaching and development and professional supervision. So there's quite a lot on the table, but it's all relevant, as you can see, from helping people make good decisions. I sit on a couple of boards. I'm based in Auckland. Clients come from all over New Zealand, and I have some overseas clients. They pretty much come from every age and stage. People often think career stuff sits in the high school age, but really these days there's so much happening in the workplace. There's a lot of development. So it's students right through to executives sit on my client list. And I love my work because it makes a real difference. People come back to me often time and time again, every 2 or 3 years, if they're changing jobs or want some help with something. They come and have a talk about things. I particularly enjoy young people who really don't have a clue what they're doing and that they need some help to get going, or people who are quite motivated in that middle stage of their career wanting to get into leadership jobs. So all of that stuff's, it's my bread and butter.
Excellent. Now, of course, today we're talking about AI, and it's quickly become a major force in today's workforce. In what ways do you think it's most dramatically transformed how we work?
Oh, wow. Where do we start with that one? I think people would be really surprised if they sat down and took a good look at how pervasive AI already is in the day-to-day life. It's quickly transforming the ways in which we work at home and at work. So we use it to help us in a variety of ways. Lots of people now have virtual assistants in their homes, the Siri and on their phones, Alexa. We get recommendations for what to watch based on our viewing history. We use navigation systems. We use chatbots on websites. In the work specifically, there's been a lot of tools that are now being adopted for use. Probably ChatGPT is the most well-known. The adoption rate is really fast. When you look at the rates and the graphs, it's taking over the world really quickly. Talking to clients in the last wee while, because I've been doing a lot of redundancy work and different things, these are the ways they've told me they're using it. They're using it to, let me think, help with writing and editing material at work. They're getting answers to questions. They're creating content for articles, blog posts, writing reports for them. They're using AI to translate languages in real time, which makes that whole international stuff a lot more accessible. They're using it for summarising meetings, sitting in on meetings so that they don't have to be there, that's an interesting one. Creating sales and marketing campaigns for organisations, collecting and summarising information, coaching, making bookings. You're using it for virtual assistants. Even my GP a few months ago asked me when I went to see my GP, she said, do you mind if AI records the main points from our conversation so I don't have to type it up? I was absolutely fascinated, and it came out with an excellent report, bullet points. So I just think as it becomes more accurate and effective and easier to use, we're going to see it even more pervasively right throughout our environment, and particularly in the workplace. So it's used a lot.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's quickly become just part of the way that you do things, and it's funny how quickly you rely on it as well. Just last week,
Yes.
I think it turned on me a little bit, and things that were working weren't. And actually, I think I was taking a reference or something, and I will get it to transcribe, as you said. And this one, I probably could have typed it out just as quickly. It wasn't that big, but I was just like, no, it should do this for me. So it ended up taking me 3 times as long just because there were a few glitches, but it was because I'd got so used to going, I can just do this and that's easy. But
yes.
Quickly become dependent.
It's interesting for me in a client session recently, they only had a quick hour and we had to get through a lot. And I used ChatGPT quickly to generate a list of skills for their CV, because I thought I'm not going to write them out in an hour. We've got the time is too short. So we generated that, and then we rewrote it in their language, of course, but it was a really good starting point. So it's really useful in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I guess there is always a flip side to things, and some people can feel wary of that or worried about if they're being replaced. But I guess, how do we know if our current skill set is already becoming obsolete? And are there specific industries or roles that are perhaps more vulnerable to AI than others?
That's an interesting question. Skill sets becoming obsolete. I'm surprised at how many people can't actually describe their skill set past the basics or past just specific industry knowledge. So I guess the starting point for answering your question is your skill set becoming obsolete. I would go through your job description and ask yourself what from your job description could be automated, what could be done easily by a computer or machine, because there's a good chance in the next wee while, if not already, people are looking at how to get it done more efficiently by a machine. You might want to think about whether you need some help to come up to speed with new technologies. If you notice yourself regularly going to some younger people in your organisation to ask them, well, how do I use this and how do I use that in an organisation? And when it's part of your the tools that you've got access to, then you might be considering, am I actually up to date enough with my skill set, or do I need to upskill a bit more? I would watch the job market, particularly read job descriptions, particularly jobs that sound a little bit like what you're doing now, but take a look at the skills they're looking for within those job descriptions and ask yourself, does that sit in your skill set currently? Because if it doesn't, there's a gap. You need to think about that. Are there new requirements that you don't know anything about? Recently, one client said to me they were applying for a job in retail, a retail job, and the first question that was asked for them in the interview is, how much do you know about AI? What is your experience with AI? And they were shocked. They were quite surprised because they're an older person changing or they've been made redundant. So there are a lot of ways that you can check out whether your skills are obsolete. Just use the tools you've already got and take a good, long, hard look at those things. The second part of your question, industries or roles that are more vulnerable. Anything that can be easily automated or use basic or repetitive tasks, these are vulnerable because you can see it's very easy to get a machine to use them or a computer to use them. So I would say any role that looks at using admin tasks, so that's data entry, payroll, bookkeeping, scheduling, customer support at a basic level, so help desk sort of support. Any analysis, basic level analysis could easily be taken over and is vulnerable. Routine finance, so bank tellers, claims processors, and insurance. Some of the creative roles within the creative space, I think copywriting, we've already seen that in the film industry is starting to come in. Translators, graphic designers. There are also industries with structured tasks or careers and jobs with structured tasks that combine creative and human elements. So helping people in their jobs do their job better. So if we think of teachers, lesson planning can start to be done and information gathering and that sort of thing. I think lower level software developers, certainly that's at risk. Marketing analysts, lawyers, contract reviews at the lower level. We're seeing a lot more of it being used in healthcare. So the services that would be provided by a human being are now being provided by AI. And manufacturing and transportation, there's quite a lot of examples. So I think when we ask specific industry roles that are more vulnerable. Some are more vulnerable, but I think everything will be impacted over the next few years. We're not going to escape and think we're safe because of where we're sitting.
54% of Kiwis regretted their career choices and were unsatisfied in their current job. However, despite this high number, only 6% reported as actively looking. Of course, there were a number of factors mentioned that were causing professionals to hold off making a career move, even if they were unhappy, such as economic uncertainty, job market fluctuations, or fear of change. But can staying put for too long be harming your career? To discuss this further, we're joined today by Lucy Sanderson-Gammon, career coach at Luminous Career Coaching. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, career procrastination, what exactly is that? And I guess how is that different from just being indecisive?
Well, it's like any procrastination. It's about avoiding making a decision or taking action. So when it comes to, in relation to careers, that might look like forever researching jobs but never actually applying, not making that decision to leave. And so it might be about knowing what you need to do, but not actually taking any action, not doing it. And this is despite knowing that by not doing it, you're causing yourself some kind of harm. You know, you'd be better off to take the action. Whereas indecision is more about having trouble choosing. So, and that could be because you don't have enough information at hand and you just don't feel confident about what you're doing. Both of them, though, really have the same root causes. It's about not having that clarity you need and not having confidence to either choose or take that action.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's a few listeners out there going, oh, actually, that sounds a bit like me at some time in my past, doing some excellent research and prep, but not actually taking that final step. Thinking back to the poll that we mentioned earlier, so despite 54% of people wanting to change jobs, only 6% were actively doing so. So a lot of prep work there. Now, of course, this was much earlier in the year and it has definitely increased now. but I still think there's high numbers. Why do you think there's such hesitancy across New Zealand?
I think this is not new. It's really common. It's not a recent phenomenon. People really do struggle to leave their jobs for all sorts of reasons. A lot of it comes down to fear of being judged, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of loss of identity. There's so much around that, and I see so much of that in the people I work with. The fear of judgment, for example, they're worried that people might think they're crazy for leaving what looks like on the face of it a really good job or a really good profession. They might think that you're just crazy, you're going to leave all that, those years of experience behind, or those years of, and that investment in qualifications. But none of that actually matters if you're in the wrong job and you're not happy in what you're doing. It's that whole sunk cost fallacy, that cognitive bias where we think we have to keep doing the thing we're doing because of what we've put into it, even if we're not going to get that back, So it's far better to be forward looking. It's also, though, really normal to have fear around change, because our brains are hardwired to keep us safe, right? And inside our comfort zone. So it's interesting how unhelpful our brains can be when we're starting to think about changing something like our job, right? So all sorts of unhelpful messages come up, and I see this all the time with clients. For example, they might say, well, maybe I should just be grateful to have a job. Maybe it's selfish to look for something that I'll enjoy. Maybe it's not so bad, and I often share an example of one client who said, maybe it's not so bad. I didn't cry at work today, the first time in 2 weeks. So maybe it's not so bad. Maybe I can stay. And that's just an example of how powerful those messages can be. And it's really important to notice. So the point is, those unhelpful thoughts that are going on in our brains, they can be really, really powerful. And I see that all the time where people are talking themselves out of, making a decision about moving or leaving their job. And so it's important to be aware of what we're telling ourselves in those messages, so that they're not, our subconscious isn't getting in the way of our decision making and being able to take some action that's going to lead to a much better work situation. The other thing, though, it could be to do with confidence, right? So depending on how long someone's been in a job that's not a good fit for them, what can happen is the longer you stay in that kind of situation, the more that it erodes your self-confidence, belief in yourself, and that again makes it really hard to put yourself forward for another job. And one of the other barriers can be thinking that if you're going to move or change jobs, it better be for the absolute dream job. Otherwise, everything else has been a waste. The sunk cost fallacy that I was talking about before. But in fact, trying to put that kind of a pressure on yourself that it only needs to be for the dream job can also just lead you to procrastinate for even longer.
Yeah, it could definitely be waiting a long time for that one.
Yes.
And also I think that, from the sounds of things, that inner monologue definitely has a lot to answer for and seems to be holding us back a lot. What are some of the early signs that someone might be slipping into career procrastination, and what can they do about it? How could they navigate away from that?
Well, I think if you find that you're constantly missing those deadlines for applications, so not putting the applications in, if you find yourself, as I mentioned before, researching, looking for vacancies, researching to the nth degree, but never following through and applying, it could be that you're pushing out your own deadlines. If you've said to yourself, well, I'm going to have left this job or changed my situation by this date, and then you push it out and say, well, I'll wait till I'm not so busy, or I'll wait till I'm not so tired and so exhausted, but that time doesn't come. You know, those might be signs that you really are procrastinating and avoiding. It could be also if you find yourself just constantly complaining about your current situation and not doing anything about that. And you might not realize how long this has been going on. So you might want to check in maybe with your nearest and dearest and just get some feedback on that, you know. And it might be that it actually, it brings it home that there's been a long time that you've been unhappy and it's time to take action and do something about it.
Well, that's all for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you've got a topic that you'd love us to dive into or fancy joining us as a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Enjoy the Labour Day long weekend and we'll see you next time.